athlete. I'm a basket case. I'm a princess. I'm a criminal. What's up, guys? Welcome to Movie Emporium's Flashback Reviews, where I take movies from the past, break them down, and tell you what I think about it. If you like what you see, of course, hit the subscribe button, join Movie Emporium, hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next, and comment below on any video that you watch on my channel. 35 years ago, those words were uttered at the very beginning of this movie, and they became synonymous, they became famous, and it created what we call the Brat Pack, which is a group of actors and actresses that kind of defined that generation of the 80s and early 90s, and also brought in a director who had been working as a producer, a writer, and so on and so forth into the mainstream to create something so fun, so thought-provoking, so relatable, but so outlandish that this movie just became a cultural phenomenon. And of course, 35 years later, we're still talking about The Breakfast Club. The Breakfast Club, of course, is directed by Hughes, who, like I said, has done a lot of work, very famous work, everything from Weird Science, Pretty in Pink, Home Alone, Christmas Vacation. The list goes on and on. There's a reason why this guy is held up on the pedestal that he is. I mean, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Look at that film. And The Breakfast Club is just a touchstone milestone of a movie. It's a movie about 5 kids who come from different worlds, but they're all relatable in the fact that they have the same problems. They're just in different forms and factors. And at the very beginning of this movie, we see just that. We see 5 kids going to Saturday detention. And when you see the different points and eras of who they're coming out of the car with and who their parents are, they're all the same. The parents are all the same. They're just different levels of parents. And it's a crazy thing to watch because you have, for instance, Molly Ringwald, who is the rich girl. You have Ellie Sheedy, who's kind of like the closet basket case, who's just kind of there. You have Emilio Estevez, who is the athlete. You have Anthony Michael Hall, who is the geek and nerd, who is like the disrespected kid. And then you have Judd Nelson, who is the bad boy, who's the guy always getting in trouble, that will end up being in jail. But the funny thing about these characters, and as you watch the story, they're not all that different. They have their issues, but they're put pressured on. Their parents are either really aggressive, really mean, really abusive, and they all do the same thing. And the fact that the story, the way it plays out, see the eventual conclusion of how, even though they will go off on their separate ways, they have a connection just based off their, homelyhood and life and so on and so forth. And they're all under the watchful eye of this character played by Paul Gleason, who plays Mr. Vernon, who is the assistant principal of the school, and so on and so forth. And his character is very interesting because he is from the adult view of the world, so he really kind of doesn't like these kids. He doesn't like what he's doing. He's kind of like what happens before these kids eventually go into society. And it's a really interesting perspective because they are just kids that are trying to make themselves in the world, and this guy, Mr. Vernon, is trying to put them down. He's like talking bad about them. And it's a really interesting view of just how things change as you get older and how things become different, how you become kind of stuck in the middle ground, and you just don't really kind of see yourself as what they used to be. And he is an archetype literally similar to like a lot of these characters. He has a little bit of each character in him. But Paul Gleason is just amazing in this movie. He is fantastic. He is that like anti-hero, or not anti-hero, but villain that's not really a villain, but he's just so dissuaded and so just angry about everything that he puts it onto the characters themselves. And he wants them to write a paper telling them who they think they are. And it's basically showing that he doesn't respect them, but what they're going to show him is that they don't need his respect. They need to him realize that they are individual characters. I love the idea behind this movie so much because of that, because of what it's trying to do and what it's trying to say. And we get to the beginning, we have them in the detention center where this movie mostly takes place. Actually, it pretty much takes place in this one location, which is the library. And in the beginning of this movie, they are just different people. They don't really talk to one another. They sit down, they listen to Mr. Vernon outside of the Judd Nelson character, who's the bad boy, so he's going to disrespect. There's some great scenes in it. But as the story moves along, as these characters kind of go through their day and kind of sit around, they start to develop this kind of weird relationship with one another, where the things of their home life, the things that they deal with, start to really kind of clash with one another. There are scenes where, like, for instance, where they're eating lunch, and Judd Nelson's character Bender is making fun of everything they eat, and it shows you kind of the dichotomy and the lifestyle of these different people. And then you have Mr. Vernon dealing with Bender in the whole segment where they're like giving detention. He's giving detentions to him, through several weeks. It's a really great scene. But then it concludes after they've kind of had their day to this point where Bender has taken pot out of his locker, and they sit around, they smoke the pot, which is kind of fantastical. It would never happen. Mr. Vernon would never let this happen, but I think Mr. Vernon's kind of an idiot, so he doesn't really pay attention. He's just wanting the day to be over with. And they have this like existential crisis at the very end of this movie that is kind of unique, and kind of just you start to like kind of wonder, like you start to realize that these characters have more to them than the underlining or the overlining themes of just being a jock and an athlete and a brainiac and a princess and a basket case or whatever Ali Sheedy's character is. But they start discussing the problems they deal with in their life and the problems they deal with at home. Bender talks about how his father abuses him and stuff like that. It's really just kind of dark and comfortable to listen to. But there are people like this. Every character is relatable to somebody. I relate to like the Ali Sheedy character and the Brian character, just really kind of mixed together. But then you have like the Emilio Estevez character talk about why he ended up in detention, and it's really graphic and really sad and depressing. But the pressures he's put on as an athlete just makes him go to those levels that when you see a jock at school, a lot of times the pressures that they're put on is immense, and they end up lashing out. A lot of these characters in this movie, they lash out because of the pressures that they're put on them. We have the Molly Ringwald character who plays Claire, and she's rich, so all these characters think she gets everything, which at the beginning of this movie her father's like, I'm sorry you had to go to detention, but we'll get you something later on. But the pressure that she is put on, the fact that she has to deal with the society of just ugliness, and just the fact that she has to put up with these people that they all care about is popularity, all they care about is money and wealth, that puts added pressure on her. So everybody has pressure. Brian, who's the brainiac, the geek, the nerd, he has the pressure on doing better in school, doing things that, other people find laughable, stuff like that. But you see the fact that it's like, it's getting to him. It's like, it makes him like, just like a ball of like uncomfortability. And that's what's so amazing about his character, because when he finally confronts this uncomfortability and when he lashes out to the people, it's like an amazing kind of trip into a world of just like a psyche. It's really interesting. And even Ali Sheedy's character, who plays Alison, she has a very weird sense about her. She's like the less pressured person, but she's an outcast, she's different, and she's very unique in how she reacts to the world. But just how people treat her, the fact that she has no friends, that leads a lot of pressure on you. And I had I had like one friend in high school, so I understand where she's coming from. But she's like so closeted and so just like hidden in the corner that she doesn't feel anything. She doesn't care about anything. She lies to people, and that's another added pressure. The movie is strange in how much pressure it shows these characters are under, and it's just insane to watch. And the fact that we have a character like Mr. Vernon who adds even more pressure on top of these kids by writing that letter, I think it's a fascinating storytelling plot device. It's a very interesting take. It's a very simple plot device, but it's a very fascinating kind of deep plot, because when they start talking, when they start developing relationships, it unfolds into some kind of like kinetic energy that is so amazing. And on top of that, there's some really great sequences in here. There's like, of course, when they're talking at the tables, there's some really graphic content that Bender, because he's trying to act like the bad boy, he's trying to act like the cool guy, is doing, and he doesn't care, and he makes some real passes at Claire, which is uncomfortable. And the fight between Andrew, who is like this jock, so he's got to stand up for everyone, he's going to beat him up, and how he reacts to when Bender kind of gives him information. See Brian, and he's like making like motions to Claire that he had sex with her, and it shows him in his like uncomfortability with dealing with situations like that, with being approached with situations like that, and to watch Ali Sheedy and like her like flipping the meat, whatever that meat is, up on the thing, and then use a bunch of, I think it was like sugar or salt or something like that on the top of the meat. She puts a little like popcorn or whatever onto it and she eats it. That's just a really fascinating, really kind of unique perspective to show a high school comedy, because it's still a comedy but it's still a more dramedy and whatnot. But it's a movie just of perspectives. It's a movie of just unique views that are all similar in some form or fashion, that are brought out to the forefront, that really show you how hard it is growing up, how hard it is dealing with these situations. So we deal with these situations. Every single person in history deals with what these kids deal with. And my favorite character in this movie is John Kapelos, who plays Carl. He's the custodian over the weekend of this school. And him and Paul Gleason's Mr. Vernon character have this like interesting like discussion where they are talking about how he's basically showing Mr. Vernon how he's kind of lost his way, how his views have become kind of corrupted. And John Kapelos is like kind of like the center point, kind of like the point in which everything gravitates around, because when he talks to the kids, he talks to them like they're, you know, human beings, which Mr. Vernon doesn't. And when he talks to Mr. Vernon, he talks to him like an asshole, a jerk, because that's how Mr. Vernon sees the world, is a corrupt garbage fire. And John Kapelos' character kind of shows him that it's not like that, even though Mr. Vernon will never change. But everybody in this movie is fantastic. Everybody in this movie is fantastic. This is a movie with a perfect cast. It shows you that these characters have grown in some form or fashion, and that's because John Hughes is very good at adapting scripts and writing scripts and forming characters and forming development and giving characters real emotional resonance that anybody can relate to. You know, look at 16 Candles, and like I said, Ferris Bueller's Day Off to an extent. These are really relatable characters, and this movie was a huge phenomenon when it came out. The status of these actors and actresses rose through the roof, and there was a reason for it, because it's such a relatable movie and such a realistic movie, and it has moments where it is fantastical when they're, like they said, smoking weed, and they're jumping through the, you know, library and doing the famous dance sequences and stuff like that. But that, I mean, that's pretty much The Breakfast Club in a nutshell. It's a perfect movie. It's 35 years old, which is crazy to think about. And it brought into light something that is never really seen as much anymore. Just characters that are real, relatable, very existential, and very just perfect in a lot of ways. And I love it just for that. So Breakfast Club, if you haven't seen it, definitely watch it. You might see it a little differently in the light of today compared to then, because it was different. It was 85. But it's a great movie. It's fantastic. It's definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it. So that's it. That's my take on The Breakfast Club. Definitely worth a watch. Comment below when you do see this. Tell me what your favorite characters in the movie. Like I said, I love Carl. I also love Brian. And I love all these characters. So, but anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification button at the top to find out what's coming next. And comment below on any video you watch, including this one. Otherwise, see you guys on the next video. Peace out. What's up, guys? Thank you so much for checking out Movie Emporium. I really appreciate it. If you want to, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification button and the bell at the top. Find out what's coming next for Movie Emporium. Also, check out these two videos. They're amazing. I think they're awesome. I think you'll enjoy them too. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.